Hi there, Kevin Goldman. I'm the Chief Experience Officer for Trusona. I'm also a board member of the FIDO Alliance and the chair of the UX committee within the FIDO Alliance.
So we're going to start by asking just a couple questions. So who here has already implemented security keys on their website? A handful? Okay, cool. Excellent. How many have it on their roadmap or are in the process of doing it? Okay, a couple. That's excellent. Who here uses security keys in their daily life or for work? Ooh. Wow, that's fabulous. Impressive. That's really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the trick question. If you're willing to share, and no judgment, who here isn't really sure what a security key is or how it might work or be used? Oh, thank you for being honest. Excellent. Okay, so just as a level playing field, we're going to start off with what is a security key. So a security key is a piece of hardware. It could be as small as a fingernail or as big as a mailbox key. And it is something that you will put into either a USB or USB-C port or tap it on your device in order to successfully complete a multi-factor authentication to access a site. It's also encrypted, it is FIDO compliant, it is very easy to use, and it is considered to be extremely secure. There's the ability to use one key for all devices and all the sites that support it. So that's what makes it so popular, and it's growing in its use. We're seeing more and more companies across many industries and globally incorporating this into their authentication tool arsenal. So that's why the FIDO Alliance UX Task Force has undertaken to develop a prototype to come up with the optimal way or standards that can be used across all the websites. Now, Andrew Shikhyar, if you listened to him yesterday, was talking about how username and password, it's like motherhood and apple pie. Everybody sees it, they know exactly how to use it. So by putting together the user guidelines and the demo that we're going to be sharing with you and the best practices that we're going to be covering, we hope to get to that point where this becomes consistency across the implementations and some uniformity, some best practices that are shared so that it gets to that point of usernames and passwords. So having said that, I am going to hand it over to Kevin to explain some of the research that we did to develop prototype and demo.
All right, we're kind of cutting to the chase here. Right on the bottom, you see get the guidelines. If you're in the back, you might not be able to see it. We can't go through everything that we put into the guidelines. This is just sort of an overview, and hopefully that you go to this URL and you can get the guidelines that yourself. But what we do want to do is talk about sort of the approach that we took, because it's a little bit different for some people to really know how did you arrive at these user experience guidelines. So I want to make sure you know the approach that we took. Is we really conducted pretty standard observational user experience research. What does that mean? Well, first we assembled a cross-disciplinary team, very diverse team, geographically diverse. We had relying parties like JPMC and others. We had vendors like Trusona and others. We had platform providers. We had login.gov. We had a lot of different stakeholders participate in this research. So we get a lot of different points of view to ensure we're looking at this from all the right angles. Next thing we did is we went out and audited some well-known websites that support security keys. So what does that mean for a UX audit? We kind of look at their flows, we look at their messaging, we look at their iconography, and we see, just as UX practitioners, what's working and what's not working. It was very interesting to see what's out there and compare them side by side. Based on those comparisons and where we thought we could maybe make some improvements, we created some clickable prototypes. And then we recruited target end users. This is important with this kind of research, to recruit the right kind of user. We'll talk about who that user is in a few moments. Then we asked those users to complete tasks like register your security key and rename your security key and authenticate with your security key. And we observed, like, in all those tasks, where was the friction and where were those delightful moments? And there were both. We took all those learnings, and then we created, with the help of IBM, created a clickable working reference implementation. so that it's working code. You can insert your security key and actually get this to work. And we did the same process with a number of participants, asked them to complete those tasks. And again, where did they have problems? Where did they not understand what was happening between the software and the key and these different things? All this process was used to arrive at the guidelines that are free to the public, and we want everybody to use and lift from them. Meaning, it's a big document, there's a whole bunch of guidelines in there, but you can pull any bits and pieces you want for your implementation of security keys. And I should say the intended audience for these guidelines, they're project managers, UX researchers, UX designers, software development engineers, software development teams. That's really the intended audience. All right, hand it back to Judy.
Thank you. So as part of the research, we addressed a number of user journeys, as you can see here. The first one we're going to speak to is awareness. So what awareness is talking about is how do you let your users know that this is available on the site for their use to complete MFA? So you need to be loud and proud. You need to really speak to it and let them know it's there. That's what this one is addressing. Next, we're talking about considerations. And this is a lot to do with education. How you manage the user's expectations, how you let them know what's coming, and what to expect, the benefits, and why they need to do what they're doing. Guiding them through the journey so they have a successful and delightful experience. Next, we talked about enrollment, so that's sign up, how to make that seamless and as frictionless as possible. It's pretty easy. We talked about authentication, or how they sign in, and that's just that. Signing onto the site using their security key once they enroll. And lastly, we talked about management. Management of the security keys online on your site. So that has to do with adding a key, deleting a key, updating the key names so it's identifiable, because we want you to have more than one, and also listing out the keys for them to be able to know what is registered and what is not. Next, we will talk about the end user participants of who we included, who we targeted to be included in the research. We identified 68 users, and the way we identified them was those who are security conscious, tech savvy, what we call a prosumer, a professional consumer. They're more technically aware. We chose the 68 and we said, half of you already have a key, fabulous. The other half, we're going to provide a key for. So we can see what the experience is and get it from both angles. Next, we talk about security keys. Which keys should we include? Because there's several different types. We included the keys that you insert, as I mentioned before, into the USB or USB-C port. We did not include biometric keys. Next, we targeted regulated industries. They tend to have broader requirements, more needs, and we figured that any other industries can easily adapt them and skinny it down, but it'd be harder for a regulated industry to beef it up and be somewhat standardized. So we targeted the regulated industries such as healthcare, insurance, financial services, telcos, even crypto. So that's what we had in mind when we were developing our prototype. For the actual demo you're going to see, we used financial services. We came up with digital bank, generic bank, and had the users, as Kevin was explaining, go in and play with it for a while. We focused on desktop browsers, and as many of you know who are using this, you can use a security key in not only desktops, but in mobile devices, iPads, most anything. So we targeted for this purposes desktop browsers. Now we're going to talk about what was out of scope, because that's just as important for you all to know as well as what was in scope. So what we did not include here was security, the security policies and recovery, account recovery. Those are things that are going to be more variable across industries and companies, and is really going to be more, I'm going to say, personal for those companies. So we did not include that here. We also did not tackle how a user could get it. Keys, as we know, you can buy them on most any place, Amazon, Best Buy, wherever. They're easy to obtain. The user brings their own, so it's not like other types of hard tokens where you need to assign them. The user just brings it along, plugs it in, signs up to use it, and they're in. Hardly any friction, very easy to use, extremely secure. Having said that, let's go into a demo.
I was going to say, who wants to see a demo? All right, let's see a demo. Let's make sure I can get this properly working here. Okay, so this demo, with the help of IBM, this is out on the open web. It's at digitalbank-test.com. You can go create an account and then go through all the workflows that are in the guidelines that you can download on FIDOalliance.org. Here we're just creating an account. It's not tied to any financial information, obviously it's just a demo. But after you create an account, you'll be able to go through all the workflows that our participants went through and really a demonstration of all the best practices for the security key experience. Now, I'm not even logged in right here, but there's already a bunch of guidelines for how to message security keys even before you sign in. In fact, the whole demo is just riddled with so many good nuggets of UX best practices, but we can't go into all of them in this presentation right here. So you're getting a very quick glimpse of what is there at the demo website. So here we're adding the key. We're allowing the user to name that key before they register it. There's all sorts of messaging there that's been well tested. And that's successfully added, but it immediately prompts them to add another key. In this case, chose not to. I see all that information here. I can edit, I can remove, I can see when it was added, last used, et cetera, et cetera. So then I'll sign out and sign back in, and this time I will be prompted to use the key. Even here, which seems like a simple experience, there's a lot of goodness right here to get this experience right. So I just signed in using the security key. All right, let's see if I can get to the next screen here. All right, we don't have enough time to go through all the guidelines. We want you to go download them, look at the reference site. But we're going to go through 7 key highlights to the findings and the guidelines.
Thank you. So as we keep saying, look at the guidelines, great information. Feel free to lift and use whatever is there, again, to promote the optimal and the standardization. So one thing that we saw was around promoting the awareness of security keys. And this would be at before a user signs in, as they sign in, and post sign in. So we saw varying degrees of how different companies did this online. So some had a banner, they said, yeah, go sign in, here's a link. Others we saw where you really had to search for it. Do they have it? We knew through our research that certain companies offered security keys for MFA, but when we went to the company, we literally had to dig and dig and dig to find where do we sign up, how do we do it. So again, as I said before, be loud, be proud, let your users know that it's there. You're spending a lot of money and time and effort to implement it. Let your users know it's there so you can get your good reporting back and your good metrics, right? Let it pay off. Next, we're going to talk about making security section discoverable as a main menu item. So even though we did know that something was, the security keys were being offered, we couldn't find it in their security profile. In fact, we couldn't even find security in one site. We had to go down about 4 or 5 levels. So going through and looking for it, if I wasn't doing this for research, I would have given up and said, forget it. You want to make sure that security is discoverable. Security is becoming more and more important to users. Make sure that they can find it and they can manage their security settings easily. Don't make it hard for them, because that'll in turn make it hard on you. Also just want to make sure that, going back to awareness, when you are marketing this and letting people know that it's out there, provide a link for how they can easily log in, or sign up, I should say.
All right, number 3, if there's any UX designers, you know the concept of progressive disclosure. This is really important to the security key experience. Even people who have a security key, maybe their work gave it to them, not everybody really knows how they work and they have lots of questions. And when they have lots of questions, they don't have necessarily a lot of trust. If you can answer those questions proactively and in ways that engage them, that builds more trust and confidence in the use of the brand and the site, etc. This idea of progressive disclosure says, don't show all the answers up front. There's a system and way by which you can show a little bit of information, and if a user is interested, they can choose to get more information. If they're interested in that, they can choose to get even more information. It's this cascading disclosure of information. This is really important for security keys.
The next two items we're going to talk about users adding multiple keys to the site so that they have multiple keys that they can sign in with. So the importance of this needs to be explained in some of the education links that are there. And you will have seen in the demo that in multiple places, we said, sorry for the pun, in multiple places we said, please have 2 or more keys. Multiple keys are important. So that is throughout our education, and we highly encourage you to do that. When we did our research, we saw where some companies never mention adding multiple keys or the importance of doing so. Why is it important? Main reason is for account recovery. If they only have 1 key, that means, how are they going to get back in? The other reason is that for ease, if I keep 1 key at home and 1 key at work, and maybe there's someplace else I spend a lot of time, I want to keep security keys handy. I can register them to use on the site, and I can have a key wherever I might be. Next is how you can really promote using multiple keys, aside from the education we just talked about, is actively prompting users to enroll in multiple keys. So you would have seen through the demo where once a user adds a key, they get a confirmation screen saying, congratulations, key is successfully added. Would you like to add another? And in order to continue on a flow or to finish that flow, they need to consciously click through, yes or no, I do or do not want to add another key at this time. So it reinforces them with the need for adding multiple keys.
Thanks, Judy. That's a UX mind trick that captively, look for it in the guidelines. It's a really good thing that we came up with, and it tested really, really well. All right, number 6 here. There's only 7, so we're almost through the top highlights. Keep the security key management experiences on the page and on a single page. It was really amazing when we looked at different deployments where the management of the keys was kind of buried within several clicks. Or I could see that I registered a key, but I didn't see the name of it. I had to click into that into a modal box. Or I couldn't see when it was last used. Or I couldn't figure out, I know that I have some keys, the website says I have some keys, but how do I remove it? How do I add another one? It seems really simple, and it is ultimately, we want to keep all that management experience on a single page. Have all the information there, have all the interactions there, everything's discoverable, nothing's hidden behind a click or hidden in a modal box that you have to click into. And then the last for the highlight, now this is going to be a mouthful, put people in control of when the security key operating system prompts are initiated at sign-in. I wonder if anybody knows what that means yet. All right, some maybe do. In the use of a security key, you have this interaction between a piece of hardware, you have a browser you're interacting with, and then you have these operating system prompts that appear on top of the browser. Some of those prompts have timeouts. Some of those prompts maybe aren't as simple and easy to use as some other prompts you might see. So it's really important that before we show these operating system prompts, that we have some priming that the brand owns, the RP owns, and it does several things in removing the anxiety that happens when those prompts show up and people feel like they're under a time crunch. Oh my God, I got to go find my key. I left it in my car. It's upstairs. Instead, have a prompt and say, are you ready to authenticate with your security key? The user says, yeah, I have it right here. I'm ready to go. And then they're prompted with that OS dialog box. We purposely kept this short for many reasons, but try to have some time for Q&A. So we have some time for Q&A. Again, the real call to action here, go to fidoalliance.org/UX-guidelines. You're going to see two sets of guidelines there, one for platform authenticators that we released last year, and then the one for security keys that we released today. And again, Judy mentioned it many times, Lift, there's so much good messaging. Many people talking about the importance of messaging and copywriting. There's so much good stuff in the guidelines that you can lift and use in your own implementations. So thank you very much, and we might have time for a few questions. Okay.
Hi, I know in the talk you mentioned that the pilot group didn't include biometric security keys. For the UX guidelines, does it have information for biometric keys, or is that something that's later to come?
Yeah, so it's not included in the scope. It wasn't included in the scope of this research. There's still lots of good information that you could get out of the guidelines and lift, even if you're using biometric security keys. But there's, we have to put a scope to the research at some point, yeah.
Hey, quick presentation. Will these be updated to address passkey as passkey becomes finalized at this time already? Or will we be able to use mobile devices as keys? And will the guidelines be updated to kind of address that as well?
Yeah, either way, I can speak to that.
As far as using these screens for beyond browser, they're easily adaptable, what we felt for using them for mobile. But passkey, I think that might be on the the FIDO Alliance's target agenda for next year. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
Andrew's saying yes.
So we're a little bit of very short backstory. The UX committee and the UX work the FIDO Alliance is doing is relatively new. We have a really rich roadmap, and passkeys are absolutely on it to provide UX guidelines for passkeys.
And given that just came out so recently, we had already finished our work by the time the announcements were being made. So tie up one thing and then start another.
One of the things that we're experimenting with is security keys using PIN authentication first to access the keys. One thing we've noticed is that the OS, if you touch the key before the PIN comes up, it'll fill the PIN box with your quote-unquote fingerprint through your touch. You guys seen that?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, Christian said vendor-specific problem. We did not, in the workflows and tasks that we had users complete in the research, we did not ask them to complete a PIN. It wasn't part of the reference prototype.
Thanks a lot. This is great research to see. I wrote a blog post a couple of years ago about the challenge of the user experience. I went through 17 different sites that are important to me, 17 support security keys, every single one using different language to complete different user experience, so standards are going to come by. I want to follow up with a question on the passkeys, because it seems like most user experience pain that we go through around the keys has also to do with the form factor. And what's your feeling? Do you feel like the traditional security keys are likely to be very specific use cases where you can use the devices as the security key itself, and that the actual mass market consumer adoption, we should be focusing on the passkeys as the experience as opposed to USB-C-based external security keys?
I think it really just depends on the specific context, the brand, the goals. It's entirely dependent on the context. Security keys for very secure context are the gold standard, are the FIDO gold standard. And so they'll continue to be around and continue to adopt all the hands that went up at the beginning around, looking to deploy security keys. They will continue to be. Additionally, there will also be passkeys, and that will be a slightly different context. So they both have a place.
The nerds in the room will like the keys and nobody else will.
It's going to be a targeted audience if who's going to want to use them. Definitely.
Hi.
So my company, we recently implemented a lot of FIDO guidelines. I went through the UX guidelines, extremely helpful. Thank you for all the research
Thank
that you've
you.
done.
Thank you.
How can we participate in the research that we're doing?
Gives me chills a little bit. A couple of different ways. Certainly on the web, on that URL at FIDOalliance.org for anybody, UX-guidelines, you'll see one of the first call to actions is give us feedback. So you can give us feedback on what was helpful, what was not helpful. You could also say, hey, I'd like to participate in the next set of research. But certainly right now, let's talk after the session. And we are always looking for additional voices and perspectives and experience to help with the next set of guidelines.
Do you have or do you plan to create any distribution guideline assistance? I find that the most challenging is getting them out to users. The type of, A or C, sending them possibly accessories to where they don't have an open port. It's not, within reach where they can touch it.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it's very challenging.
Yeah, I'm happy to hit this one if you want.
Yeah. We didn't really focus on distribution. That was something that was definitely outside of our guidelines because it's more of a company by company, the need for it. A lot of companies don't distribute them. It depends, so it's very specific.
Yeah. Very clear challenge. What we looked at is said, hey, we have limited scope, budget, resources. What's the kind of research scope that will have the most broad applicability? And it's so unique and contextual, the distribution of keys, that we decided to keep that out of the scope. So that was listed in there. It was just out of the scope for this particular research.
And because just to add one more thing, and part of the reason I think that we also didn't really include it is the security keys by their nature, you can, as I mentioned, you can just go and buy them in many different places, and users can just bring their own keys. So because of that, a lot of companies aren't looking to invest in buying inventory and distributing them. Some are because maybe they're going to brand them and hand them out for marketing and to promote their use. But most companies, I feel like what we've been seeing, they'll be doing that unless they're providing them for their employees.
So
because you don't have to assign it to this user and to that user. The user takes it just.
Right. So you'd rather suggest that maybe a subsidy or something like that, or
That was part of what we left out.
There's no plans for that.
That was part of one of the things we left out was the whole unpackaging and distribution. That was part of what we left out.
Yeah, there's a whole intent to buy and why to buy and then buying and then unboxing and then registering. That was out of scope.
Hi, thanks for this. This is great. I love seeing it. In your scope, you said you target about 68 prosumer users as your initial test case. Is there any plans in future iterations to expand that to less knowledgeable individuals to kind of understand what a worker on the floor or what a person off the street, what their experience with it is like? We know from reports from Microsoft and Google, adoption isn't great. So how do you drive that with the US?
Yeah, so we don't have any specific plans right now, but we do have plans to continually iterate and update the UX guidelines that we have. So we have 2 now, we're going to be adding more, and we're going to be updating these. So yes, we'll look at who those target users are and make those decisions then. Or if you have real strong opinions, like I mentioned before, reach out to us and give us the feedback for what you want as the community.
And just to add to that is, if you look in the Learn More links and all the messaging throughout, we did try to educate as you go through the flow, which is part of what you were talking about when we put together the prototype, is making sure that the users know what to expect, what's coming, how does it work, So we had that in mind, even though we targeted prosumers in our user group, we did have an eye to making sure we were educating as we went, because you can't leave it that everybody knows the same thing. There's always going to be
I love the
variables.
concept of establishing trust with the user as part of the process. I just want to see more.
Yeah, just not assuming that they all know.